So poor old Uncle Walter was popped into a cupboard under the stairs. You know, for safekeeping, of course. That was until someone finally saw sense and had it buried alongside his family at St Mary's Church in the village. Arguably where it should have been to begin with, but you know, who am I to judge? We all grieve in different ways. Now, as we reach roughly the halfway point of the tour, just a polite notice that the toilets will be closing in about 10 minutes' time. But of course, with Big Ben on our left here, which is the bell within the tower, and the bell was transported down the river by barge, where 16 horses pulled it across Westminster Bridge and dropped it off outside the clock tower. And you should be sure to count the number of strikes that the bell tolls, because as I mentioned before, superstition runs deep through British history, with the number 13 widely believed to bring bad luck. And legend has it that if Big Ben were to ever strike 13 instead of 12, then the lions in Trafalgar Square will come to life and havoc will befall the royal household for 3 months. Sounds like someone had far too much time on their hands thinking of that one. However though, it did strike 13 on one occasion. That was just a few days after Queen Victoria's death. So what happened to Trafalgar Square? Any of the lions come to life? Nah, nothing happened. Of course it didn't. A load of old rubbish, you'd have seen that coming. They believe that this superstition comes from the Bible, as it was Judas, the disciple that betrayed Jesus, was said to have been the 13th guest that sat down at the Last Supper. But on the topic of lions, you may have noticed on our right here a row of lions' heads cast in bronze along the embankment walls. And they were sculpted as part of the sewage waste from a great stick. And there's also a rhyme that is attached to their significance, which goes like this. When the lions drink, London will sink, and when it's up to their manes, they go down the drains. And London last experienced serious flooding back in 1928, so it's probably safe to say that the system works. Although in that flooding in 1928, 14 people died and thousands lost their homes. So maybe not completely successful, not foolproof. Of course you had an ever-growing population in London, and in the 19th century, London became the world's largest city. But with all those people, that meant a lot of sewage. But where did it go? Well, it went to the river. Of course, the Thames was just one enormous sewer. But with running water not available, people had no choice but to use the same water for cooking and drinking. And so this caused a series of cholera outbreaks. And during a particularly hot summer in 1858, things came to a head. As the heat increased, centuries of waste began to ferment in the Thames. The Great Stink, as it was known, rained down on the city of London, and so repulsed by the smell by the politicians that they were forced to evacuate their riverside rooms, and proposals for a new sewage system were finally put in place. It did take another 20 years or so to finally complete that sewage system, but hey, you know, the thought was there. Found yourself plenty of structures here, but if you dug for long enough, you may have just found yourself ancient artifacts. And one such treasure was found by workmen who were dredging the Thames here at Waterloo Bridge back in 1868. A unique Iron Age helmet with horns dating from around 150 to 50 BC was pulled from the dense mud of the Thames. It is the only one of its kind to ever have been found in Europe. And as a symbol of posturing and prestige, it is now on permanent display at the British Museum. This iconic bridge is featured in many popular films and TV shows, notably Michael Caine's Alfie, the BBC series of Sherlock and The Sun, Waterloo Sunset by the Kinks. Yet this is a bridge that's had two lives, having originally been called the Strand Bridge. It was later renamed Waterloo Bridge after the victory at the Battle of Waterloo, when the bridge opened in 1816. However, though, that bridge in particular wasn't sturdy enough and had to be rebuilt during the Second World War. But as most of the male workers were away fighting at the time, it was predominantly up to the women that remained behind. And that is still the same bridge that stands today.
Wow.